All right, the future of Ethereum. So the blockchain stands at a pivotal moment of its evolution. It's just come off of a very major technical upgrade. There's been some changes at the Ethereum Foundation in terms of leadership. The price of the native asset token has lagged behind in comparison to other cryptocurrencies over the last year. And that's led to a lot of criticism on those steering the network as well as those building on it. So I want to get into all of it today. But first, before we get into talking about the path towards mainstream adoption, about the eea-eth, about the roadmap, I want you guys to introduce yourselves a little bit. Who are you? Why are you here on stage? What do you do? Why do you care about the future of Ethereum?
So I guess I'll go first since I'm right next to you. I'm Paul Brody. I am the global blockchain leader at EY, Ernst & Young. And my night job is that I am also the chairman of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. And in case you can't tell from the EY branded t-shirt, we are very much an Ethereum shop. We have been a public blockchain and Ethereum shop for about a decade now. So I think of ourselves as big boosters and big implementers of this ecosystem.
I'm Josh Stark. I've worked at the Ethereum Foundation since late 2020, and I'm part of the management or leadership team. I cover a lot of responsibilities, and these days I'm really thinking a lot about how to improve the Ethereum Foundation and how to communicate more effectively both about the eea-eth and about Ethereum and everything awesome that's happening in that ecosystem.
Great. So I actually first want to get into what's going on at the eea-eth because that's sort of been one of the more relevant topics over the last few weeks. And the eea-eth's been around for a really long time, really since its nascent days, and it was only really the first big institution sort of helping steer the network and the research of the blockchain. And the role of the foundation has sort of evolved, and I kind of want to hear from you how you see the eea-eth evolving in its role moving forward, especially as other big institutions sort of come to play a pivotal role. I'm thinking about Etherealize, for instance, which is taking on more of the Wall Street component, the advocacy component. So where do you see the eea-eth and its role sort of evolving to?
Yeah, so I think there's two crucial things that we've heard from the community and we know that the community expects from the eea-eth. One is stronger leadership on the roadmap, on executing that roadmap, and really help coordinating the ecosystem to tackle the big challenges that lay ahead of us and lay ahead of the entire crypto space. And the secondly is communicating more clearly about what the eea-eth is doing, being more transparent about where the eea-eth's focus are and what the different teams inside our organization work on, as well as communicating about Ethereum. I think the thing that I see is that Ethereum's fundamentals are incredibly strong, but few people are standing up to tell the story of that ecosystem and to boost the incredible stuff being built and draw in new users, new members of the ecosystem. So I think those are two crucial things. In terms of how we're going to work with other organizations like Etherealize, this is something we've been doing for many years. It's maybe not as well understood outside of our small world, but there are many organizations that make up the Ethereum ecosystem in addition to the eea-eth. There are all of the client teams that build the client software for Ethereum. There's all the L2 orgs. There's enterprises like EY, as well as nonprofits like the EEA, and now also Etherealize that are really leading the charge in terms of onboarding and communicating to Wall Street. So we're always working and collaborating with others and sorting out, where are we covered already in the ecosystem because someone else is doing an incredible job, and where are there gaps that the eea-eth needs to step in and fill.
Yeah, I want to ask about the two new leaders at the top of the eea-eth, Xiaowei and Thomas, because this comes at a moment when there was a lot of criticism of the previous leader, eea. And since you're on the management team, maybe walk me through the process of what you guys were looking for in terms of a new leader in this new era, that the qualities that eea may not have had. And yeah, just who are they? They're still so new, I think, to people. They're well known in the sense that the developers know them. They've been very involved in different aspects of the blockchain. I'm thinking about Xiaowei was very involved in the merge, and Thomas also has been involved with client teams. But give us a little bit of a sense of why those two, especially since there's a lot of names being thrown around for that position.
Yeah, so for those that don't follow this all very closely, I think last year, Vitalik and eea knew that it's time to look to making a change. The EF always needs to be evolving to the moment and adapting to new challenges, and eea did a great job for the period of time when we needed that kind of leader and that kind of organization. But Vitalik and eea understand that the EF needs to evolve. So earlier this year, Tomasz Stanczyk and Xiaowei Wang became co-executive directors of the Ethereum Foundation. Tomasz was previously the CEO of Nethermind. Nethermind's a long-term company in the Ethereum ecosystem. They build a very popular client for Ethereum, as well as work with many businesses and enterprises around the world as a blockchain development partner. So Tomasz brings a lot of energy in terms of understanding what the ecosystem looks like, both at a deep protocol level and as a business leader, as a CEO, as a founder. Xiaowei has worked at the EF for many years and has been very deeply involved in research and protocol development. She was very involved in some of the crucial research that led to the merge, where Ethereum moved from proof of work to proof of stake, and really understands the EF at a pretty deep level. So in terms of why co-executive directors, Margot, I think there's a few crucial things. One is being able to have more capacity and coverage. There's so much to do in Ethereum because so much is happening in Ethereum. And as we see this new wave of onboarding, especially institutions and enterprise, just more capacity at the management level to deal with that is really important. Global coverage is also important. Ethereum is very global, and having one leader that's at home in Asia and another that's at home at the West allows us to do more. And the last is finding that balance between shaking things up, making some improvements, making sure that we're lean and operating efficiently, but also the careful stewardship and values that have brought Ethereum through 10 years, 16 upgrades, 0 downtime, and the largest on-chain economy on Earth. So I'm feeling great about working with them. I think they're doing a fantastic job, and there's lots more to come.
I got to chime in a little bit here. So as somebody who sits outside, have been developing and building on Ethereum for a decade, one of the things that really got under my skin is the degree to which some of this fact-free narrative on Twitter formed so much of the discussion about eea, the Ethereum Foundation's leadership. Let's step back and look at this objectively. 5 years ago, Ethereum was a proof-of-work blockchain handling about 1 million transactions a day and was struggling to really scale. It performed really well in terms of uptime, like 0 downtime. But if you had a lot of people trying to transact, and we, EY, we have clients who want to do things like inventory management that would require 2 million transactions a day, right? 5 years ago, that couldn't be handled on Ethereum. Today, Ethereum is a proof-of-stake chain with more than 120 layer 2 networks. We estimate network capacity, depending on transaction complexity, somewhere between 300 and 450 million transactions a day. And transaction fees at the L2 level, they average under 1 penny per transaction for the last 3 months. So if I step back and look at eea's tenure very objectively in terms of the results, I would say A+. I look at results, these are results.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective, especially given online. There's been a lot of other perspectives regarding that. But I want to finish this chapter on the EF on one more thing before we get into the roadmap and adoption. We're sitting here talking about the future, and one of the criticisms out there about the EF is that there's a little bit of a lack of transparency. A lot of people want to have access to seeing what's going on financially at the EF. There's these financial reports that come out every 2 years. Sometimes we're lucky we get once a year. And we reported back in September that I think it was thanks to an AMA with Justin Drake, where someone had asked sort of about the runway at the EF, and at that time, in those prices, the runway was about 10 years left in terms of at the prices of September. So we're talking about future. We're talking about, obviously, concern about financial planning. What's being done? I mean, Ethereum, the price of ETH today is higher than it was back in September, so maybe you have a little bit more runway than 10 years, but what's being done, and how are you guys thinking about planning of the future and planning the sustainability of the EF over the next few years, or past the 10 years, I should say?
Yeah, I'd say the bottom line is, look, we know there's a lot of work to do. We know that there's a lot to coordinate. We know that the roadmap needs to be delivered on, and we're confident with the treasury that we have and the spending that we're seeing that we'll be able to get there for many, many years to come. Obviously, it's a challenge. We need to both balance being bulls on ETH and holding the majority of our treasury in ETH, and the reality that this is an incredibly volatile market that goes through upturns and downturns. And so we need to find a strategy, and we have been doing this for many years now, that balances that saves when times are good, and that is able to then spend through the downturn. So there's no simple answer, Margot, but we do take a long-term perspective. The other piece of this, of course, is that, as I said, Ethereum is an ecosystem. That's a great thing about it. It doesn't all depend on the EF. And so we've been working for many years to help build up other institutions that can carry that work forward with us and work in parallel. So I'd say in terms of Ethereum has the deepest bench in the crypto ecosystem. There's no other ecosystem that has so many organizations working towards the same goal that provide more capacity and also redundancy in the long term.
So the roadmap. There's been a lot of ideas thrown out there. I mean, Ethereum has really embraced the layer 2 scaling roadmap, using these auxiliary networks to scale, provide cheaper transactions, lower gas fees. Dang sharding has come into the mix. At some point I heard about Verkle trees. I mean, this is all jargon. You shouldn't be able to understand this anyway, but I'm just pointing out that there's all this confusing jargon and consistent pivots. And so for some, it seems like the roadmap doesn't have a clear vision. How do you respond to criticism of that? And also, Paul, you're from the institutional side, and obviously layer 2s have sort of really come under focus with institutions. And one of the criticisms with the L2 roadmap is that it's sort of driven away activity from the L1. Was the L2 roadmap a mistake? It's also led to fragmentation, it's led to other different versions of issues. So I want to hear from you both, sort of, how do you respond to critics who say that this roadmap has a lack of clear vision, it's ever pivoting, and whether pursuing the L2 roadmap was the right move?
So from my perspective, I'm delighted with the roadmap. And when people talk about there's being a pivot, I don't really understand what they're saying. Ethereum is being Ethereum, which is identify a problem, fix it, and move on to the next problem. In terms of the biggest problem that we were dealing with over the last few years, it's scale, right? Going from being able to do 1 million transactions a day to 450 million sort of network capacity is great. By the way, when we sit down at EY and we think about what it might mean to bring a major industry like automotive on chain, right? Every car part, every car, to be able to have the traceability of those components. Something, by the way, that's going to be needed as we get into a world of, for example, cross-border trade traceability. We think about billions of transactions per day required. So my view is L2's great. Also, we need L1 to scale, right? And we need specialization. And let me just talk a little bit briefly about the value of specialization and the incredible value that the L2s bring. The L2s out there, and there are now more than over 120 of them, and I think there's another 80 announced, including one by EY, which is our privacy network. So L2s give us specialized things. They give us privacy systems. They give us, in some cases, relatively centralized chains with very low prices. Stuff like that is great for inventory, because if somebody steals your, say, car parts token, they've corrupted your data, they haven't actually stolen your money, right? So I want extremely low prices and massive scalability for certain things that are relatively low security risk. On the other hand, if I am transacting in real estate, or I've got one of my institutional clients that's moving large value bonds, I want a very high security environment, and maybe I also want privacy. So from my standpoint, we want scalability everywhere, we want specialization and differentiation, right? And we want a roadmap that looks to take us at least 2 more orders of magnitude in capacity up, and 2 more orders of magnitude in capacity down in terms of cost per transaction.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of the roadmap, here's the roadmap. We're going to scale L1 so that Ethereum L1 remains the heart of the on-chain economy and the home of DeFi. We're going to scale L2 to onboard billions of users and satisfy the use case needs that enterprises like EY and others have. And 3, we're going to improve UX so that all of this feels like one platform, like one product. That's the roadmap. In terms of whether the L2 roadmap was a mistake, absolutely not. There's a very high degree of conviction that this is the right architecture. I think the thing that's happened is, a thing I like to say is that Ethereum hits the hard problems first because Ethereum has gone the furthest. All ecosystems are going to end up with something like an L2 roadmap with modularity and specialization. We're just the ones that have gone furthest down this path. And we found the twists and the turns and the challenges on that road, and we're dealing with them. I think the specific thing that people address is L1 scaling. And yes, I think we could have turned our mind back to L1 scaling sooner. But one of the reasons it didn't happen initially was that there was a lot of focus on standing up the L2 ecosystem. And we've succeeded at that. There are now, as Paul said, more than 100 L2s. They host billions of dollars of assets with millions of users with lower transaction fees than any other chain that's competing with Ethereum. It's been a success. And now we are turning our mind as an ecosystem back to scaling L1. And that's a huge priority for the next hard fork, Fusaka, later this year. And you can expect it to be a priority moving forward to scale both these systems in parallel.
Where does privacy fit into this, though? Because this gets both at adoption and at the roadmap. And what I consistently hear is that for these big institutions to come on chain, privacy is going to be needed, like majorly.
It is.
And so, you know, I'm wondering where you sort of see when that is going to start to take focus, and whether that, you know, in terms of adoption, is a major blocker, and maybe what are some of the major blockers? Is it the UX? Is it the fragmentation? Like, why isn't the adoption there yet? Is it a mix of all those three? I want to hear your thoughts.
So I'll start with privacy very specifically. This is at EY, this is our #1 priority. We've spent 8 years building Nightfall and its counterpart Starlight that allow you to do privacy transactions at scale. This is hugely important for a couple of reasons. Number one, pretty much anything that enterprises do is eventually, if you're going to do enough of it, you're going to need privacy. You can do some stuff with stable coins that are fungible without privacy, and you can rely upon like the broader stream of network traffic to conceal what you're doing. But almost everything that enterprises make is non-fungible. That's easy to track. And if you want to do a full smart contract, right, think about how enterprises buy from each other. Money for stuff under the terms of an agreement. So I need the money to be private, I need the stuff to be private, and I need the terms and conditions to be private. And no large company is going to come on chain and tell their competitors in the clear, here's what I'm buying, here's how much I'm paying for it, here's where it's going, these are the rules I agree to. Like, that's a non-starter. So for enterprises, privacy is absolutely essential. It is the #1 priority in the roadmap. It's our biggest research focus, and it warms my heart to see other companies joining into this space now.
Mm-hmm. From the eea-eth perspective, like how does privacy sort of fit into all this? Because honestly, I haven't really seen much coming from the core devs in terms of focus right now on privacy.
I mean, I think that like I would list privacy up there in kind of the core values that the Ethereum Foundation cares about realizing in the world. A lot of the stuff that exists today in the crypto ecosystem, for it to really scale, you know, you need privacy, both at a personal level and also for larger enterprise uses. One reason you don't see it a lot, I guess, from the eea-eth is that, you know, the privacy solutions that exist today and are working are more on the application level. And so they're not something where there's a large focus on the protocol itself right now. So for example, there's a great project called Oxbow that uses what are called privacy pools to allow individuals to have private transactions. There's, you know, awesome new zero-knowledge technology being deployed in many places, like Aztec, a very privacy-focused L2. And of course, Paul's talked about Nightfall and, you know, the privacy products that they care about at UI. So there's a lot of application-specific things happening, and it's an area where, you know, there is good development, solutions are coming online. It's just not something that the eea-eth has a comparative advantage in right now. But absolutely, it's important. It needs to be part of the mix.
I would just add, privacy is hard. Like, I have a joke that we're 8 years in. We started working on privacy tech 8 years ago. I like to joke we are now 8 years into what I thought was going to be a 2-year project. You know, our first prototype we showed at ETH DevCon in 2018 in Prague. A single transaction cost $100, and we needed an entire block of Ethereum to execute it. Today, we can do that transaction for about 25 cents on the mainnet, and we can do far more of them. We're about 10,000 times more efficient, but that's taken 8 years. And so privacy tech is just straight up very difficult.
Yeah. We're running short on time, so I have 2 more questions for you guys. And, you know, a lot of the focus over the last year around Ethereum has been on the price and its lack of performance compared to other cryptocurrencies. And, you know, there was a panel up here before on talking about stablecoins, and stablecoins seems to be the hot topic these days. how do you see Ethereum as a store of value or as an economic asset in a world full of stablecoins or tokenized RWAs? Like, how does it fit into all of that?
Yeah, I think there's many things that have fed into the value of ETH over the years. One of those, obviously, is the fact that it's a utility coin. People, buy it in order to spend on mainnet to gain access to the very valuable resource of Ethereum L1 block space. Another way that contributes is now that Ethereum's proof of stake, when ETH is staked, that it's a productive asset that earns yield. And Ethereum is also used as a store of value. It is, an asset used in DeFi, in many systems. It has these, really durable properties that make it a great store of value. In many ways, better than Bitcoin because you can do stuff with it, whereas Bitcoin, is not very programmable or anything like that. So I think that ETH has a more complicated narrative than BTC does, and so BTC has crossed that chasm first. But I think the world's not going to stop learning about these technologies and these systems. The world is going to have an appetite for a slightly more complicated, but just as real value proposition. And I think we're starting to see that now. So I think that markets eventually price value, and I think that Ethereum is the most important project in crypto and always has been.
Mm-hmm.
I would second that. I would just say, I think culturally, from an ecosystem perspective, it is really hard for ecosystems to fundamentally to do multiple jobs. Companies are like this, right? And I think ecosystems are too. People tend to do one thing very well. So Bitcoin, in my opinion, it's the asset. And even if there are technical components about Ethereum that make it technically a better store of value, I think in the mind of the public, Bitcoin is the asset, Ethereum is the platform. And so from my perspective, Ethereum may do many, many things well, but first and foremost, it is going to be the platform on which the world is going to build all the next generation of financial and industrial infrastructure, and the value is going to come from the transaction fees, the staking, and the engagement, more than treating it as like a pure scarcity asset.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so that actually transitions perfectly into my last question, because I was going to ask, to end on this note, we've talked a lot about ETH being used for a financial system, but also, being home to the most stable coins by volume as of February, you said, or on Twitter, I think, Josh. But, or basically my question is whether in the next 10 years, Ethereum's goal is to be the global infrastructure layer, or is it to be this place for like a hub for decentralized finance, like a decentralized financial system? What is it sort of leaning towards, or can it incorporate a little bit of both?
Yes, so for me, this answer is really simple. 100% of business agreements boil down to this. I've got money, you have stuff, we are exchanging my money for your stuff, whether it's a financial asset or a physical asset, under the terms of some kind of agreement. It could be DeFi, it could be interest-bearing, it could be a loan, it could be a procurement agreement. Doesn't matter what it is all is going to be done on Ethereum.
Yeah, my answer is also both. I don't see those as different things. The amount of kind of financial activity on Ethereum mainnet feeds back into the security of Ethereum as a whole and makes it this incredibly durable, hard, incredibly neutral platform that can be plugged into for anything, right? It is the global root of trust that is secured in part by the financial activity, but can be deployed for so many different things, whether that's agreements or whether that's as a kind of foundation for new cryptographic techniques. These things really go hand in hand.
Love it. Thank you for your time today.